Properties are, as the name suggests, attributes of a given entity. The reason I said entity instead of an object is because anything in Max can have properties, not just geometry objects. A bend modifier has angle, direction, axis, or a standard material could have a property whether it's set to faceted, what its diffuse color is, etc. In the spoken English language, the term object usually refers to actual geometry objects, things we can hold in our hands. However, in the programming world, any abstract entity is called an object. So if I say a variable can hold any Max objects, I don't just mean boxes and spheres, I also mean it could have a controller in it, or a bitmap, or a modifier, and so forth. All Max objects, remember that this means all entities, have properties that we can access in the same fashion through MaxScript. We'll now see how we can get to know what properties each object has, and how we can access them for modification. There are two basic ways to figure out what properties an object has. One is through using the MaxScript online help, which we'll see with an example a little later, and the other is using MaxScript itself, executing MaxScript functions. One MaxScript function that lists all the properties of an object passed to it is showProperties. It will serve our needs perfectly. So let's try this function on a simple box object. Create a box object in the viewport and have it selected. Then open up the listener window and type showProperties and the $sign variable. Remember that the $sign variable holds the current selection, the box in our case. So let's hit the numpad enter or shift enter to evaluate the line. But before we get to the actual properties listed, let's track how Max evaluated the command. It started reading the line from the left. So the first word it got was showProperties. It noted that this word is associated with a function. And this function, showProperties, is going to need one input variable. It got the $sign, which holds the box in itself. So Max passed the box value to the showProperties function and listed all the properties for that given object type. Looking at the list, we see the property names, the property types, and then a false in the last line. Let's not worry about that for now. The dot before the property names indicates that the value name belongs to a property. So when accessing properties, we'll actually have to use this dot as well. Let's try to evaluate $sign dot height. The result will be the value of the height property of our currently selected box. When Max evaluates this simple line again, it starts reading word by word. At first, it finds the $sign variable, which holds our current selection, this single box. So in Max's mind, the $sign gets substituted with the actual box. Then it reads further to figure out what we want to do with that box. The following dot height means we want to get to the height property of it. To change the property, we can simply use the equal command. So say $sign height equals 100. Then let's evaluate it. As you can see in the viewports, this assigned a value of 100 to it. We can also freely change the other properties of the object, like $sign length equals 100 or $sign width equals 100, setting all the dimensions of the object to 100. Note that these properties that we assign values to here have a type of float. The number type that can be a fraction as well. We assigned 100 to it, which in MaxScript's world is an integer number since it doesn't have a decimal point in it. 100 in float would look like 100.0. There was no error message at the value assignment, even though there was a type conflict, since MaxScript did a quick conversion from our integer number to the float type that the property expects. There is no loss in conversion, since the integer 100 equals to the float 100. Now let's try $sign height segments equals 10.5. Height segments is an integer property, yet we are assigning a float fractional value. Let's try it. It did work. 3ds Max did a simple conversion again, rounding the value down to 10 and assigning that instead. If we are going to the Modify panel to check it, we'll see that it indeed has 10 height segments. Let's see now how we could check the properties of another type of object in Max, a material. For that, let's clean the scene by resetting it first, like that, then cleaning each of the respectable fields of the MaxScript listener by going to each one and use Edit, Clear All to have a fresh start, a clean scene. Let's open the material editor. At all times, this material editor holds 24 materials. These are materials that are not necessarily used in the scene, but are available for modification already. If you don't see all 24, that's probably because in the options menu of the material editor, you can set how many slots you want to see at the same time. By default, it's usually set to 3 by 2. I've set it to 6 by 4 so that we can see all 24 of the materials. If we want to access the materials in the material editor, we can use the getMeditMaterial function. Which returns the material value of the indexed slot of the material editor. Every MaxScript function has a result that it returns. The simple multiplication function returned the result of the mathematical multiplication, which was a number. The getMeditMaterial function returns its own result, which is a value of material type. If, say, we wanted the first material in the material editor, we would go getMeditMaterial 1. Let's evaluate this line and see what happens. The result of this function is printed, as usual, in blue down here. 01 default standard. This doesn't say much as is, but if we know that the getMeditMaterial function returns the material itself as a result, it starts to make sense. We see the printout of the name and the type of the material. Standard. How can you use this returned value? The easiest way, of course, is by taking the returned result and putting it into a variable. So say our material equals getMeditMaterial 1. This would put the first material in the material editor into our variable named ourMaterial. As mentioned in the variables part of this DVD, I tried to use a descriptive name for our variable that helps us identify what we have in it, like our material would have our material in it. So the same way we used showProperties with the $sign variable holding a geometric object, we can use it with a variable holding a material. So if we evaluate this, then do showProperties our material, that will give us a huge printout of all the properties of this standard material. You can see that the material has an awful lot of properties. These are just basic properties. That's a pretty big list. What is each for? Well, that can sometimes be a daunting question based on just the name. Of course, the MaxScript help has a full description of all the object properties. So when in doubt or looking for a certain property, open the MaxScript online help at the type description of the given object. In this case, we have a standard material, so it will be somewhere around standard. So let's open the MaxScript reference and go to the index tab. Since we're talking about a standard material, let's just start typing standard and see what comes up. Well, the first three is something else. You can tell that by the name. This is like standard objects, geometry, definitely not the material we are looking for. Standard open and save dialogues, or standard flow. But the fourth one is actually promising. Clicking on it will show us the contents. This is what we were looking for, the standard material type description. For each of the properties that were listed here, the help shows us the property name, the property type, the default value of the given property, and if the given property has one, the alias or alternative name of the property. So when you don't know what a given property name covers, like shader type, just look it up in the help and you will have a description. What values can it take and what each of the values would actually mean. Well, let's see. If you're looking for the diffuse color, say we want to change the color of this material, it would probably be around here, diffuse. It's a color type, and this is the default value, which is gray. It is animatable, and its alias is diffuse color. It controls the diffuse color. The diffuse color is the color of the direct light. Well, that's something we already knew. So let's say our material dot diffuse. Let's make it all red, which means a color value consisting of 255 for the red channel and 00 for the green and the blue channels. Let's evaluate it. We can see the change instantly in the material editor. It changed to red, since the R material variable holds the actual material object in it, which is the same material that is in the first slot of the material editor. So let's sum up quickly what we learned about properties. Everything in 3ds Max can be considered an object with properties, be it a material, a geometric object, a controller, modifier, everything. These properties are the basic attributes of that given object. We learned to use the showProperties function and touched the MaxScript Online help as a way to get the property list of an object.